Yeah, okay, you're gonna have to grab that. Oh, you're not gonna, because it's gonna make noise. But too late now. Hi, everybody. We're starting a little early, and one of the gifts for today is my god dog has brought me the loudest toy he has to crunch right in front of me during our call. So create a world. What can I say? Create a world. So I want to thank you all for being with us today. I'm starting a little early because uh, the I think it's just really important to set the stage. And so if you came on early, you'll be experiencing it. And if you came on late, we will have set the field for you to be here with us today. I noticed that I wanted to start today by actually the phenomenon of CreateAWorld, and none of the other two, Victoria and Janice, are aware of what I'm about to say. So there's no prescript on this, and we actually like it that way. So I just want you to know. But I also want to tell you about the collaborators. If you go to the CreateAWorld YouTube page, it has all of our websites and I think all of our emails. And we're serious about what we do and what we're about and our commitment to life. We're really quite serious about it. And 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 so if you need us, we're here. That's all I want to say at this juncture. And this is why we take every Friday, varying combinations of us to be with you, because it is important to create a world, particularly when a world is dismantling and failing at many levels of its creation. So we're committed to create a world where we're standing. In other words, where Janice is standing, she's committed to creating a world. Where Victoria's standing, she is. I am where I am standing. And it is my offer to you, my suggestion to you, that instead of looking at the outside world to create a world to take care of you, for you to take what's so, or what you hold to be so, and create a world for yourself where you're standing. And for some people, it's to create a world for themselves, a way to live and a way to be that is self-fulfilling, basically. For others, there's a way to be and a way to be with others, to take care of others, to be there on behalf of others. And whatever your framework is, whatever your mojo is, whatever your design of existence is, it's you're the one that's standing there creating a world. Whether it's your world, whether it's a larger world, it doesn't matter. Where you're standing, all we have now is to create a world. And where we're standing, given whatever we have to create with. Two of the ways I'd like you to listen today, and I actually wish I'd said that way back when we started this, is try not to listen for understanding or validation, although validation may occur. Just be like you're sitting by the stream or in front of an open fire, and because your system will absorb what it needs to absorb. Your consciousness will uh, find a way to listen to the information in a manner that is um, significant for you and doesn't have to be understood. The need to understand right now is a little bit of a is causing a bit of a mental breakdown in a lot of people. So be where you feel that life is committed to you and your well-being, and be with others that are you feel are committed to you and your well-being, and just start working it. 2025 is going to be a interesting year. A year where one's relationship with oneself and others, but particularly to oneself, is really going to matter. So I wanted, this is a season for Christians, the Christmas season for Ramadan, Judaism. We're all celebrating something this month, and maybe we can all just celebrate life with ourselves and life with each other, and have that really be a focus for our. Yeah, I definitely have a background feed. Why don't you all mute, and then we'll just open our mics as we need to. I think that's the way it's going to have to work. Not quite sure what's going on. So the I can't remember what I was saying. Anyway, the point is that one of the things we looked at to talk about today was the void and the depth of the void. And I'm just going to share a personal experience, and then I'll mute, and then whoever opens their mic will talk, and we'll navigate this strange little creature that found its way into our EM, little voice creature having its own little talk in the background. So when I was young, this started way, way, way. I remember my mom told me the second sentence I ever said was "Mommy, wrong world." That was the second sentence. I was about 3 to 5 years old. And from the very beginning, for me, I'm not saying it's true for everyone, something was terribly wrong here. It wasn't the world that I remembered. And then the second thing happened that I only really could bring language to recently, because as some of you know, I had a strange heart thing happen the 1st of December that persisted for several months. And I had to maintain myself to stay alive until we could figure out what to do about my heart, or if there was anything we could do. But I noticed something that I don't think I would have noticed if that hadn't happened. In order for me to be stress-free, which, because every time I wasn't stress-free, my blood pressure would shoot up to 240 over 80. It was not fun. And I had to dive deep. I had to be in the depth of my relationship to every moment of my existence. And it had to be precious to me. It had to be precious. And it triggered something that I really had to ride out in December, January, February, March, April, till I had the surgery. And what I had to write out was a memory, and a memory of when I was young, because I kind of came this way. I didn't learn this way. I came this way. So I would try to have really in-depth conversations with my mom and dad, or actually, I got along better with some of the kids in kindergarten. But, I would try to have these in-depth conversations. And I remember it clearly because it wasn't about having in-depth conversations. It was about who you needed to be in your social world, who you need to be in your secular, what the rules of the game were. And so as I began to drop into this depth, I was very grateful for the field of Tantra Mat, because without us realizing it over these years, we're kind of swimming in in-depth conversations. We're kind of swimming in it. And it's always kind of a shock when you don't realize other people aren't. It's really kind of a shock. And then I began to get emails from people recently that, very recently actually, that are really having trouble, really scared. And we can say, well, why are they scared? But the truth, does it really matter why you're scared? It only matters that you're scared, basically. And in the last email I got, I wrote him back and I said, when I used to write, this is before the books, I was terrified to sit down and write because the world around me closed off. and I would be in my own depth, and I was afraid I'd miss something, hypervigilant. I came from an abusive family, so it kind of comes with the game. And I would be terrified to go into my own depth alone with myself because I might be something I needed to take care of in the physical world. And then recently, fast forwarding to the last few weeks and last month, I would say maybe 6 weeks even, there's been this fascination, these emails, these Facebook conversations, these WhatsApp conversations about how our solar plexus seems to be operating independently of our point of view, like it's working through something. And then I had this experience of just watching what was going on with my solar plexus one morning. No, I am in a very beautiful home. I'm totally fine. There's no reason for me to fear myself, fear where I'm standing. And yet these fears would show up. But then I realized my body was actually smiling. It made no sense. It made no sense that I would be having something I was interpreting as, borderline anxiety or panic attack or whatever you want to call it, fear, whatever it is. And yet the body was smiling. And then I tried something. This is the point I want to make. Then I tried something. I said, okay, I'm just going to drop into my own depth. And the minute I did it, it was gone. The tension in my belly was gone. And ever since that moment, this is about 3 or 4 weeks ago, every time I feel it start to come up, I ask myself the question, and it's really an unanswerable question, except somehow I think it satisfies the body. I ask myself the question, where do I go to find my depth? Where do I go to find my depth? And it calms almost instantly. So I wrote a young woman who wrote me, and I just shared the story with her. And she wrote back and she said, I don't know my own depth. And she said, but I noticed when I just asked myself to find it, I wasn't so frightened anymore. And there's something that happens in evolutionary, devolutionary process. We're a duality. I don't know if you all know that. There's not an either or here. When there's evolution, there's devolution. When there's a construction, there's deconstruction. When there's contraction, there's expansion. When things are coming out of existence, things are going into existence. So there's something about that void of just opening yourself up to your own depth, which I think puts us in a neutral position. I think it puts us where these look like opposing forces, which they're actually not. Duality is not opposing forces. But about duality is where everything always seeks homeostasis, always seeks to come into balance. So there's something connected with this void, this empty place, where we're in search of our own depth. And I'm saying this linguistically, that actually gives us access to something that's beyond our cognition. And then the last thing I wanted to say is in the oldest traditions of spirituality, these are before religions, when there was a direct relationship with creation, a direct relation of being part of the greater whole. The three areas that human beings tended to, one was spirit, which for us could be emotions. One was body, which for us could be flesh. And the other was cognition, the ability to think what there is to think. Not think about, but to think what there is to think. So I wanted to bring those tidbits this morning, and then I'm going to close my mic, and we'll see who opens their mic while we have our little creature with us in the EM. Thank you all for listening.
I'll, since I loved Presence the Body, I'll start there. I have a swirl of thinkings that rise from what you're saying, Tundra. It's probably been 20 years or more that I met Joan Borsenko, who at that time she was coming to do a talk, and her mom had just passed, left her body. And she came and did this talk with us in Columbus, Ohio, through the Unity spiritual church system. And I was listening to her speak about celebration of life, and that she had chosen to take leave from everything in her personal life to be in her personal journey with mom in those final months. And I wrote a blog about 4 words that I heard from that talk that have stayed with me and are present today. And it's the void. It's the, how do we step into our own depth? So because I love the body so much, I want to just play in it for a moment. And I invite you to feel your breath for a moment. And I just started thinking of the idea of duality with the breath, that the in-breath is the evolution and the out-breath is the devolution. And they're just 2 sides of the experience, like you were saying. And what is the magic is after you take an in-breath, there's a slight pause or there's a longer pause, depending on how you do it. And then as you take your out breath, at the end, there's a pause before the next in breath. So the pause after evolution goes into devolution. And the pause before devolution rises into evolution. And for me, that pause is those 4 words of Joan Borsenko. No longer, not yet. And that's our void. And that's our deep place that we can always return to.
And I feel that what Tantra is presencing this morning, and Victoria, you captured it as well, is that we are creators. We are designed to create. It's why we ache. It's why we long. We carry in our body and in our souls remembrance. And sometimes when things are not yet, it's because the world is reconfiguring. And sometimes when things are not yet, it's because It's for us to bring them about. And I would say that the time that we're moving in is going to require significant discernment about which of the not yets are before us. And sometimes it may be both, but for any given ache or longing that we have, which is the not yet. I want to share two examples of that. When I saw the movie Avatar, and I saw it in a theater and I saw it in 3D, and it was very impactful in 3D. Afterwards, I went to the restroom and I started to cry. And then I started to sob. I sobbed for a good 15 minutes. It may have been the hardest I had ever sobbed in my life. And I didn't even know really what was going on. I got glimmers of it, but it continued to reveal itself with work that I did in the field of Tantra Mat. And I realized it was my remembrance. Because as I watched that movie and I watched the community living in harmony with nature, something in me remembered that. And there I was remembering that in a time when caring about the environment has definitely always been a cornerstone of this life for me since I was a child. And hoping I could help others love the mother the way I loved her. And so there I was in that remembrance of how it had been. And also in my deep craving of the not yet, because in our, at least in the United States, in our industrialized society, we are, as a collective, not inhabiting that place. We continue to act like we have power over, as opposed to that we are held in the arms of. So that was a very potent not yet for me. And it just lives in me as an informing. And there are many times where I now flash back to that moment and realize that when I'm experiencing grief, it's often tied to something I remember that is not yet here. The other story that I feel called to share this morning is about my early years of teaching. So teaching was a profession that I kind of stumbled into. I mean, my father had been a teacher, and a lot of why I chose to become a teacher was because of how I watched him be and who I watched him be to others in that role. But as a kid, I always thought I was going to be a marine biologist. I was going to be out on the Greenpeace boat, putting my body between the harpoons and the whales. But I think creation had other plans for me, and I was very frustrated with the disconnection that was expected of me if I was trained to be a scientist. I had someone tell me early in I think it was my freshman year of college, because I was protesting some of the live dissection, which is called vivisection, that was happening. And I said that I wasn't going to participate. And they said, why? And I told them, and they said, well, caring has no place in science. Emotions have no place in science. If you're here because you care about animals, you're in the wrong place. And And while I would go on to push back against that, it was a definite guidepost for me. And so I ended up picking up a second major in education. And in my first education class, I was like, oh, it's because I'm supposed to be here. Okay, I get it now. So, I got trained in all the things and all the ways, and you do this and you don't do that. But when I went into my first classroom, and I was really in a position of having to create because I got hired about 3 days before the kids came back. I got my dad called me and they said, hey, somebody actually called me about this job, and it's a class just teaching animal care. And like they asked me if you might be interested, and I'm like, oh my God, yeah. And so basically they started this class. It was a veterinary science program. It was in the technical wing of so it was like a hands-on thing. And it was basically to teach kids how to take care of animals. And I was like, hell yeah, I want to do that. But I arrived to find a classroom with no curriculum, no textbooks, and no animals. So, so I was definitely in this CreateAWorld place, but I was also in a place of what I believed education could be, which is not necessarily how I'd seen education be, but how I believed it could be. And I was teaching high school kids, and I was 22 and some of them were seniors. So we were only 4 years apart. I was far more peers with them than I was with the people I was teaching with. But I wanted to create a world, and I did. And it was a world where we were all collaborating on what this thing could be. And I gave my students the room to help me shape what was going to happen. And they were very startled by that. They certainly weren't used to it. Not everybody was a fan. Wasn't flawless by any stretch of the imagination. It was messy and uncomfortable, as creation, as birthing is. But I built a world, and I drew students to it, who could be served by it, but who could serve in it. And it's been profound in shaping for me what education can look like. And I continue to hold space for the revamping of our institutions so that it becomes a place where students blossom, because that's what can happen in the environment that encourages them to be the seekers and the learners of their own souls, which doesn't have to be in conflict with learning stuff. Those two things can happen at the same time. And I remember in the middle class, teaching, and a kid walks in who was somebody I taught later in the day, and this was the morning. Just comes walking right in. Can I have the scissors? And I'm like, what? Well, I need scissors. And my teacher in the other end of the building doesn't know where his scissors are. And I said, well, Miss Crenetti always has the scissors in the same place. So can I go get the scissors? And I was like, okay. But it was just so profound for me that a teenager whose mind's on 80 million things so experienced the depth of what I created that they knew where the scissors were even when they weren't in my room. Because I wanted people to be able to access what they needed to access when they needed to access it. So, and there were plenty of people that did not like the way that I taught. I had success with students that other people didn't have success with. And that was a source of massive irritation to my bosses. One said to me, and then I will wrap, I was living in DC at the time. This was before cell phones, and traffic could be insane. And it one accident on a road and you were 4 hours getting where you were getting. So that happened to me, and it actually took me about 2.5 hours to get to school. And I had to stop on the side of the highway at a payphone back when they had those to call my boss and say, I'm stuck in this traffic. I have no idea when I'll be there. So he had to go cover my class because it wasn't a planned absence for me. And when I finally got there, he said to me about this kid that he had warned me about this young man from very early on, and was very irritated that I seemed to have a relationship with him. And they were trying to kick him out of school. And the fact that he was passing my class was preventing them from kicking him out of school. But he said to me, he doesn't act like a criminal in your classroom. I said, maybe it's got something to do with the fact that I don't treat him like one. Creating worlds. And even when things seem its bleakest, and I think we're about to experience some bleakness, we can still create worlds.
Okay, let's see if I can share and not sob. I think this is like the perfect month to do this. The first perfect time. It turns out when the new president takes office, it's Martin Luther King Day, which I didn't know till about 5 minutes before we got on this call. And his known phrase is, "I got a dream." And I just want to take this a moment to really acknowledge the Field Collective of the Field of Tantra Mat. Kaya, a friend, we're all friends. There doesn't seem to be not friend, and yet we're at work about something. We were talking about this morning about how important it is as we move forward to not try to understand what's going on, to just be filled by what we can find ourselves to get present to that makes our solar plexus and our bodies feel connected to life, as simply said. But when I started this Powers of Being in 2014, I had already been downloaded the creation templates. I'd already swum with fungi in Ireland that gave me the name Tantra Mat. Didn't even know what it meant. I had already, I just found them in 1995. I had a company called Spirit Primal, and our newsletter was called The Beloved. So I'd already, back in 1995, realized that by the time we got to 2023, because remember, I'm a mystic and a seer and a prophetess. Those on the weird side of things for some, that I needed to make sure I kept that date, which would have been last year and this year. And the date was so we could make it through 25 and 26. It was a very simple, and not just make it, like survive it, but the beauty of things falling apart is we have a lot to say how they come back together. In a world of no solutions, where we're standing, we can generate solution. So I was saying to Kaya about, I really hoped people stopped trying to understand what was going on. It's way, way past our bandwidth, way too complex what's going on right now. If you only look at the secular, it's just going to deplete you to the baseline. But we're having amazing things happen in the collective. We had this one time where we had a gap in time, and people all through the field during this 45-minute gap had unusual experiences. So there's this nonlinear world that I'm always been present to, that I knew that I needed to start building a collective, not a collective to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world, but a collective that could stay standing and could keep empowering each other and specifically make sure that each of us was our unique and essential design to creation, specifically that. So I fast forward to now, everything I was shown has occurred. Everything. It's shocking. And for people who've been with me for a trajectory of time, they are watching it occur. And the trajectory into 25 and 26 is that we remember we're the beloveds, that we are beloved, we are loved. And we each have our own unique and essential connection to creation in very metaphysical ways, in very supranormal ways, in very sacred and deeply satisfying ways. And I was shown that during this period of time, as the secular world is having to work out its aberration of duality, that the sacred world will build the strength and stamina to restore our sense of our value as something that is alive and able to be vital, regardless of what's happening around us. And just in this last 2 months, there's been a lot of evidence that this trajectory I've followed since, I think it's 47 years, because I've been looking at old emails and things I've been going through, that trajectory I trust that trajectory now. We're in the inside of the trajectory, because we're headed towards 2027. And the inside of the depth of the trajectory is that we become self-aware. And that means we begin to delight, not like an ego, but delight in what's ours to do. Delight in where we are and not being, we've been conned into thinking that life shouldn't be a struggle. I mean, bull. Glad I didn't finish it. Life is a struggle because it's how sand makes pearls. That's how it works. And we get to discover our capacity and our emotional capacity, our physical capacity, and our mental capacity. So as I start into 2025 and I'm starting a new magician of self, and I'm, starting these last 2 years that I promised, what I'm directly connected to, I'm so excited because it's going to end up with us finding ourselves having to build our own strength, stamina, capacity for who we be and where we be, what happens, where we be, how life is being asked to occur, basically. And no quarter given. no quarter given. It's like I used to say, I didn't learn how to be this way. I had to survive being this way. But what's so weird, I think somebody said it to me, maybe it's Kaya yesterday. No, Deb said, it's like everything's in reverse now. And what that means is like, oh my God, I'm going to be forced into being myself. Oh my goodness, where I'm standing, the only way I'm going to start to feel settled and myself and real and not frightened is by being connected to myself and expressing myself, and sometimes scary, because we're told not to, as Janice beautifully described, scary ways. But the need for being myself is stronger than being frightened by the world around me. So it's kind of a weird thing. It's almost like the watching at a metaphysical level, not the theory, but the metaphysical, beyond the physical. Watching at a metaphysical level, what we are is a human being finding itself again and finding itself in relationship to itself And then there's some other really weird things, which I won't be bringing to the party till next year when there starts to be evidence. See, I'm very smart as a psychic because I can talk a trajectory, but there's also evidential things I'm shown. But if you tell people these evidential things, they may slide out of the trajectory because they think it will happen, not that they are the source of its happening. So it's kind of an amazing time. And then to watch the body, it's one of the things, Victoria, I wanted to ask you, because we have a thing about deep emotion, but we can't be in our depth without deep emotion. You know, when Janice was talking, I thought I was just going to have a meltdown. And you're the body person, but between Janice and I, you win hands down. So we just found out we had one recently. So we're the new kids on the block. I'm 78, and I think Janice is quite a bit younger than me. But it's nice at 78 to find out you have a body and that it's actually capable of extraordinary things. So if I'm going to turn it over to you, because I'd really like us to I'd love for us to understand that to enter the void, you have to be in the remembrance Janice talked about. Every time we weep, we're bringing something back into existence. You know, every time we remember, every time we crave something we can't find, we are at the metaphysical level, literally generating it back into existence, literally. So I'm going to turn it over to you, honey.
Oh my God. I'm gonna start with the connection of the mind that I've spent the last 12 years uncovering my mind and the capacity of my mind to listen to the body in a new way. And I think that you can't think this next 2 years. Like you said earlier, you cannot think it the way you think you would. That's no longer. And for me, what that means is I'm generating from the void, from the pause, from the listening through the solar plexus, through the emotion, through the body sensation, that I don't have to comprehend it, but I can ask, like I did, I was telling you before the call, I asked, what is this body sensation that's happening to me? And I get my mind gets information, gets the informing from asking that question, by being curious. And this is CreateAWorld, is to be curious and to listen anew and to be interested in why it's no longer the way it used to be, doesn't matter. And what's not yet here is I just want to be in that listening. And I promise myself now, I promise myself, when I am in the listening between the breath, when I am in the curiosity, that creation is always answering me now, always. I wasn't hearing it previously to the capacity that I do now. And it feels like that's what's before us in 2025, 2026 is, like you said, growing that capacity to be fully present with our own being and the human response, whether that be sobbing for 15, 20, 30 minutes, even if we don't know what we're sobbing about yet. That's just no longer and not yet clear discernment. I loved that word. I was like, yes. And the body never lies. There's been a book about this. The body never lies. You can always trust, whether it's a fear response, an anger response, a joy response. It's all just simply an informing response that you can be in relationship with. And then you move forward from that nudging. And I use that word a lot. It occurs to me. I've heard in our community so many times that people use the word niggling, like I have a niggling. Okay, that's my birth name. And I'm like, I have walked the path of niggling, and I came in with that. There's probably 30 of that name in the whole world. So there's a small group of us that came in with that remembrance, right? So for me, it's the niggling is like the first part to your remembrance, and then I'm in a nudging now because I already know the niggling. Like, you came in as who you are, wrong world. I kind of get a taste of that. I don't have the fullness of it that you do, but I do appreciate and resonate with, wow, wrong world. And so then I'm cultivating this way of the informed niggling into nudging into creation. And I wrote recently, I wrote on paper, I care about, and I was sobbing when I was writing it, I care about human beings standing in their sovereign soul being nature over the next couple of years. I really care about that. And since I wrote that down on paper, there's an informing and a nudging that called to me to respond to a Facebook remark. And I'm like, I want to do something about this. I'm here. If you want it, I will be present with you. And it's like what you were saying, Tantra. It's in conversation. CreateAWorld has been a crucible for this. And we just want to keep expanding it to have a chance at creating a world that's not yet here, but we're on it, and it is individualized, held in a crucible of deep exploration and knowing that, and the coherence of it, that we have a good chance. We have a good chance of creating the world that we came here to create. Anything else that?
No, I was going to have a huge emotional response, but it seemed to back off.
That might be good.
Moment. I wanted to read one of the things in the chat. The chat's beautiful, by the way. You all keep going, but it was beautiful. She said, "We are creators. That's why we ache. That's why we long." And I thought, wow, that nailed it. That really nailed it. And it has something to do with that capacity. We try not to ache. We try not to long. We try not to be emotional. We try not to grieve. And yet, isn't that the through line right now? Isn't that where we don't lose touch? Where we don't forget, where we don't bow down, where we don't coil, in on ourselves? And then something came up for me, Victoria. This clinic I'm going to, this wellness clinic, I asked him to come on in February for 3 sessions, not because of the products or the services, but she's just got a kick butt conversation about how bodies love to feel alive, and that they're very basic things that let the body feel alive. The mitochondria lets the body feel alive when it's intact. To have dead cells out of the body feels vital and alive again. And I'm so excited about the conversation. And it's the same thing in emotions. When we cry, we're getting rid of dead material that has been weighing us down. You know, that is our spiritual relationship to our body relationship, with glutathione, for instance, it's everything seems to be coming into some kind of harmonic balance. Really crazy, wonderful. And then the thing you said about we do want to be able to think. We don't do well if we can't think with creation. And what, that this thing we do, for people that don't know, we do something called Are You There? If it answers, we say, who are you? If it answers, if it doesn't, we just stop. And then we say, can I ask you a question? If it says yes, then you ask. If you don't hear anything or it says no, you don't ask. It's called developing a relationship. And then you ask your question and you either get an answer or you don't get an answer. But this isn't woo-woo or fantasy. This is the part of our mind that hears the greater whole of which we're a part, regardless of what we're going to call it. And because it's missing, it's now becoming more mandatory because everything's trying to come back into balance at the next greater whole, which means the sacred will become more commanding, compelling for people. The nonlinear, which I don't know if we could ever get into, will start to become more, being present. That's the nonlinear, simply being present. It's not difficult. It has nothing to do with linear time at all. So there are all these magical phenomenon that we've heard about that have been, at a distance, basically. And now we're finding ourselves operationally, we could say, at the effect of them. But I'm not so sure it's not a great effect, And for me, years ago, I was like Janice and I. Janice and I are both lawyers, and my daughter didn't want me to go to a rally when abortion was, outlawed. And I said, Jesus, honey, I'm the one who was put in jail for 3 days because I punched a policeman at a activist rally, during segregation. And but that's not my way now. Now my way is for those of us that can get our spirit back, get our emotional field, treasure our grief, treasure our anguish, treasure our longing. And it does make you want to collapse. It does make you want to walk away. But I think it resets us. It resets me. It resets me. Because once I'm on the other side of it, it's flushed. It's flushed. And then I have a quiet, calm void for what now? What now? But we've got to, it's just the solar plexus is just flushing. It's just flushing because it's the seat of our soul. Our heart might be what has us emotionally involved in the world, but our gut is what gives us the strength, stamina, capacity to carry on. And I think it's evolving itself back into its original design. I really do. And it's terrifying because we have learned to have bodies that don't feel. And all that's happening is the body's coming back online. And it's coming back online beyond the survival mechanism. It's coming back online by needing to just be. Whatever there is to be, no matter how frightening it might be. Now, everybody on the listening to this now and later, I would have not had that as coherent a statement if I hadn't had Janice and Victoria sharing what they were sharing. This is why people should come talk to each other, because we're getting the language of the shared experience through our coming together and sharing. Not sharing trying to figure out what's going on, but sharing what we're present to and what we feel ourselves experiencing. And so that's my response. Janice, over to you. And Victoria, go ahead.
I just want to add, and we're getting body coherence because each one of us felt the body response to each other in our own way of experiencing it. But that's coherence when all three of us can resonate in that. And that's vital to being in conversation with each other too.
The void's a fertile place. And Tantra over the years has had to help me get very comfortable with the void. Because again, in my industrialized, westernized culture, there's not supposed to be stillness. There's only supposed to be movement, movement, movement. While I've worked with various meditation practices and I find those helpful, sometimes the sort of, I don't know, tone or purpose of meditation is to sort of is to quiet the monkey mind or whatever. Not that there's not a place for that, but to me, really, the purpose of meditation is to drop into the stillness where you can experience the void. Whereas I think when you look at indigenous cultures, that's where they live, that's where they hang out. They don't have to learn meditation practices to slow down enough to get into the void. So it's countercultural and revolutionary to pause, to even say, I don't know. One of the pieces of advice I got in my education classes that I thought was really helpful was they said, look, if you don't know, just say, I don't know. Student asks a question, I don't know. Let's go find the answer together. And that is the perfect place, as Victoria has walked us through, to turn it over to the body. When you experience that I don't know in your brain, Victoria, you can say how accurate this is, but I feel like that's almost always the body saying, it's because I know. And I would like to tell you, if you could please sit down and shut up and listen. It's a part of what
To interrupt you, Janice, because one of the most common things happening for people, which you just nailed it, is the irritation that I have to rest. It's like I shouldn't. That is so the programming of let's just stress ourselves out till we die. Do you know? And literally, I don't understand why I had to rest so much today. I understand why I just had to be. I mean, literally, these are statements. And it's such a tell. That's why I said our own evolution is being forced upon us because the body's winning. And it's meant to. That's why we embodied, simply said. Go ahead.
And what would it be is that if we just chose to live in the state of being first and then interact and respond from that state rather than I have to go rest and find it? It's like people start talking about cocooning this time of year as we come into the darkest night of the year, and I'm like, hell, I started back in September. What are you talking about? Sorry, potty mouth.
Go ahead, Janice. We have about 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
So embrace the void.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very important for everybody to understand. Oh, our little creature's gone. Open up, Victoria. Let's see if our visitor's gone.
Oh, got what he needed. Or she.
She or it or them.
Or it or they.
But the one thing we really are committed to coming on to this conversation with all of you, and I want to read the last thing that was said, that I just put, treasuring our grief and longing are like composting the richness of living. I mean, I copied the chat today because I can't figure out how to have it stay present on the YouTube thing. So I'm just going to cut and paste and put it in there because the richness of your all's conversation is really something I don't want I don't want missed. But we are a work in progress now. We are evolving. Oh, there he is back. We are evolving. And it's really important to those of us that kind of make it through a threshold to be able to say, you can make it through this threshold. You can. And then there'll be another one. And then there'll be another one. And there'll be another one. But I promise these next 2 years, it doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your occupation. It doesn't matter about how successful or unsuccessful you are in the secular world you were born into. It does matter who you be, because that's the goop. That's the goop that underlies all of what eventually becomes civilization. So we'll see you next week. We don't know who you'll see next week, but we will see you next week. And it looks like the prophetics are probably going to fill faster than they ever have in a year that we've ever done. And it's exciting for me because everybody that does a prophetic knows they're doing it to build a field within which new realities can occur. And that people are enthusiastic about that, I think is a great way to start 2025.